Some of you may know my childhood story that when I was 16, my adopted parents left me on a street corner in Ardmore, Oklahoma to fend for myself. Do you think that created a challenge for me as a child? To say it didn't and hasn't had an effect on my life would be an understatement. The thankful part of this was God was overlooking my life. He brought people to my life that offered me a positive influence. I don't know where I would be today or what would have happened to my life without these people. One of those he brought to my life was Archie. Archie was a gentleman who was a constant in my life for almost 3 years. When my mom informed me that I could no longer live in her house unless I paid room and board, that meant I had to get a job. The job door that opened to me was Luke's IGA grocery store there in Ardmore, Oklahoma. J.C. Luke was the owner. And over the years I worked for him, he was a tough, positive influence that held my feet to the fire. But let me tell you about Archie. Archie was in his mid-50s and was the produce manager. He was a great guy who never met a stranger. He would talk to people whether they wanted to listen to him or not. After I had worked there for about a year, I got promoted to assistant produce manager, which meant I worked side by side with Archie. Archie didn't know the meaning of silence. From the moment he arrived in the morning until he was walking out the door, he was talking. Archie had a wealth of stories. Every time he talked, he always had a story to go with whatever it was he was talking about. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a person like Archie in your life, but he could get on my nerves. I would be working, and he would come out, stand next to me, and just talk. At one point, I talked to Mr. Luke about Archie. And I'll tell you, I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. I shared my feelings about Archie's nonstop storytelling. Mr. Luke looked at me, got that look on his face that he always had, stopped what he was doing, put his hand on my shoulder, and said with a sense of humor in his voice, "Richard, I have known Archie for years, and that is just the way he is. He's not going to change. Just take a deep breath and accept him as he is." So what did I do? I learned to tolerate Archie's stories. I have to tell you, at that time, I didn't understand the impact Archie and his stories would have on my life. As much as I didn't want to listen to his stories, I did. Even today, many of Archie's stories are fouled in my mind. There are times when I'm in a conversation and an Archie story will pop into my mind. Have you ever had a similar situation with a storyteller in your life? Many times it's the same story over and over and over again. But they're a storyteller. Now, do you like a good story? I do. I think stories are important to life. Why? They strengthen what is being talked about. They can cause you to pause. Open up some emotional connections. Stories can be a reflection time. And I tell you what, you won't forget many of them. Starting about 2 years ago, I began talking about wanting to do a series on the stories Jesus told. I found my interest in them while I was in seminary, and I took a course in the parables. Dr. Fish, who was the instructor, made me look at the Jesus stories in a way I had never looked at them. He took his stories and showed us how these stories not only had a meaning for the scenario Jesus found himself in, but a living meaning for today. My curiosity started then and has remained with me throughout the years. I have read and reread these stories and have wanted to take these Jesus stories and breathe life into them that connect them to the world that you and I live in today. I've always looked for parts of yesterday's history in order to find a meaning for today. Starting in April, I'm going to start a 6-month series where I'm going to breathe life into 6 of what I feel are the most relevant stories Jesus told. These 6 stories have such an important connection to the life today. You've probably heard this statement: history repeats itself. As our lives evolve, so does our need to rethink and dig deeper into things that are meaningful to today. So many valuable lessons are still sitting in yesterday, waiting for us to open them in our life today. The stories that Jesus told, I believe, have a message that stretches far beyond his day and time. This is what I want us to discover as we dig into the expanding meaning of each of these 6 stories. So I'd like to give you a personal invitation to join me as we go through these 6 stories. We're going to open up some really interesting lesson connections from the yesterday of their telling to the today in which we're living. I look forward to our discussion time at the end of each storytelling time. I'm very excited by the numbers of people that have already signed up for this journey with me. This will be a series where we will take the stories Jesus told and connect them to real life situations. Make this journey with me. I know I present a lot of information, but the information I present, I try to do it at the right time and the right place to bring the information to life. I believe the Bible is the living Word of God. I believe, yes, it's a history book, but it's also a living book. And I want to take these 6 stories, parables, and breathe life into them in order for us to be able to see, feel, and understand a needed message for today. For 2 years, I've wanted to do this, but each time in my private time and in my prayer time when I've asked God, I want to do these, my message was, not now. But recently, in my quiet time, I heard it's time to do these stories. So I want to ask you to join me on this journey. Go to richardflint.com/live to register. For me, this is if not one of the most important series I have done and offered you. richardflint.com/live. Look at the video that is there and what it tells you about what we're going to be looking at. Join me. I think together we will have a very, very challenging, learning, inspirational time as together we focus on and learn from 6 of the stories that Jesus told. Make the journey with me. richardflint.com/live.